Welcome to another Shake That Us podcast. Today I get to have another old friend of mine who is actually an old CrossFit buddy. We've met many times in coffee shops, having amazing conversations. So I'm looking forward to this one. He is currently competes in Olympic lifting events, which is insane. Lifts some crazy heavy weight over his head. He loves to go backpacking, lives in Utah and goes backpacking all over the place with his wife. And he is just a dude that I used to beat him in workouts when we first started CrossFit. And then he passed me quickly. So I was always trying to catch up with him, but we had tons of fun. On this podcast, we talk mostly about relationships. We talk about our kids and as they grow up, the different stages of their lives. And we also talk about just our partners and what that means and how to serve them. We talk about the hardest thing about being a dad. We talk about how as your kids age, you don't really get a chance to restart, but you get a chance to reset your relationship with them. And then what it means to live the good life. And so without further ado, I'd love to introduce my good friend, Darren Yager. Well, thanks for joining us, buddy. Before we get into it, would you mind sharing a quick backstory on yourself, and then we can kind of get into the meat of it?
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, I'm 55 now. I grew up in Florida, in a Christian middle class family in Central Florida. My mom and dad are still alive. They're 82 years old right now. Huge positive influence on my life. So if I look back at like just my childhood, I had awesome parents that loved me and instilled tremendous values in me. And so they absolutely had the largest impact on me in my life. I'm grateful that they're still around. And I'm been married for 32 years now.
Impressive.
To my wife, Cindy. And we've got 4 kids, 2 from her first marriage and then 2 from our marriage. And so, the kids are separated out in age. I've got 44 and 42 on the older side and 25 and 24 now on the younger side. That's hard to believe. But yeah, so and then I'm retired now. Had the opportunity to get into the wireless business when I was 21 years old, and I've been in the wireless business pretty much my entire life. Back in 2005, 2006, 2 partners and I started a business, and we sold that business 3 years ago. So it was in operation for 11, 12 years before we sold it, and I've been kind of enjoying the proceeds of that a little bit for the last few years, and still young. We'll see what the next year has for me, but yeah.
Love it.
Anything else you know about my background?
No, I'm just curious. How in the world did you end up with someone like Cindy? I mean, not that you're not a good-looking dude, but come on, man.
Definition of marrying up.
Yes, that is for dang
sure.
So, no, it's a good.
No, it's actually a good story. It's a funny story. I said I got in the wireless business when I was 21 years old, and showed up to my day one new hire training, and beautiful girl walks in, and I'm like, whoa, this is going to be a good class, And so I knew her boss. He had helped get me kind of into the business from the job that I was in before. And so after the class, I went up to him and I was like, hey man, what's the deal with this Cindy Connor girl? Tell me what's going on. Unbeknownst to me, she went to him as well because she knew that he knew me. And she asked him the exact same thing.
Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
It was pretty crazy, man. There was chemistry from minute one.
I love it. That's a good story. That's a good story, Darren.
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing. So I want to share how I know you. So it's been
Okay.
I'm terrible with time, and if you listen to any other podcasts, I'm always like, so I think I've known you for 10 years, maybe 15. So I don't even know, but I've known you for a long time, and we actually met, I believe, through our church, and I think we're in a men's Bible study together. Yeah.
Yep,
All right.
that's my reflection as well.
All right, awesome. And it was way back in the day, and we hit it off. I think pretty quickly when I met you. We kind of hit it off. I was doing I was way into CrossFit, and you were in the triathlons, and so I was like,
Yeah.
I was super impressed, and you were super lean, and you were you weren't bad mouthing me about CrossFit, but you're like, you knew. Actually, I was impressed with what you were doing with doing triathlons. And then I think the men's Bible study, whatever, it didn't fall apart, but just moved different ways. And then I think you show up one day at CrossFit, and I was like, all right, this is cool. We kind of reconnected.
Yeah.
And then you were Mr.
Yeah.
Consistency for sure. And that's where we kind of reignited our relationship, and we would work out the same time together. And it was funny because I'm like, you started, and I remember, and I'm calling it like I saw it, but you were just like, man, Clay, you were like, you're so good at this, or how do you lift that? And you were looking at me because, I mean, it's intimidating, right? You show up and,
Yeah.
sorry, I'm getting a call. And you show up and you're just like, geez, these guys are lifting these heavy weights. Not really, but looking like they're lifting heavy weights. And then not long, you passed me. And like, just as far as like, you were really into it. And I kind of was, but not really. You passed me and never looked back. Okay, there he goes.
Yeah, I would have a different perspective on that whole scene, but that's
Yeah,
pretty close.
yeah, it is pretty close.
I remember like when you first started talking about CrossFit in that men's group, and I was doing triathlon, and CrossFit was so new back then
Yeah,
that I really didn't even know what you were talking about.
yeah.
And you start talking, people would describe CrossFit and you go, I don't even know what they just said,
No, I know.
and you were also getting into paleo.
Oh yeah,
I
that's
think
right.
from a diet perspective,
Yeah.
this is what I remember.
Oh
I
jeez.
remember you always coming into the men's group after your workout, and you would have like peanut butter and fruit, and you're eating all this whole food, which I was kind of healthy, but
Yeah,
from a triathlon perspective, which is just super carb oriented and all of that, and you were kind of on the opposite side, and I'm like, what's this guy doing?
yeah,
And then I remember watching your body change,
yeah, yeah.
and we went mountain biking one time,
Um,
and I remember seeing you out on the trail, and I was like, this dude's got some muscles, man. And it was like, I need to like give this CrossFit stuff a chance.
and then you did, and then you kicked my arse. So it's all good, man. It's good. It's good. It's good for sure. Well, hey, we can
That's
definitely
the good
reminisce.
CrossFit though, because it's like, I might be able to beat you in one workout, beat
Yeah,
me in another workout. And
yeah.
so you get some confidence, and you also get that
Totally.
healthy dose of humble pie
Well,
every day.
yes, you do, which is actually a great segue, buddy. So I want to let you know the reason why I'm having you on this podcast is because I'm looking for those people. I'm not even looking for, but those people that left a mark on my life, and you were definitely one of those fellows that left a mark on my life. And the reason why I was thinking about it is over the years of me knowing you, it's your genuine humility that you have towards life. You've been very successful in many ways, and however man looks at success, as far as financially, and just like you've got a beautiful wife, and you live in Park City, and so you've got a lot of things that you could like if someone wanted to is qualify as success, but what really appeals to me is your humility in the midst of that. And also the thing that kind of brought us together a lot is our families, right? Is raising kids, kind of having them grow up together, not necessarily together, but dealing with that and what it means to be a dad and father to them, and relationships and all that kind of stuff. And so with that being said, it's kind of where I'd like to just ask you some things. And just because I'm curious, and I know we've talked a little bit about it before, but I would love to start just with like a question that I have that I know have an answer from me, but I want to hear from you. But what's the hardest thing about being a dad?
Okay. You're not pulling any punches out of
No,
the gate right there, buddy.
nope, I'm not. We got a short amount of time, and I know you've got some answers for us, and I would love to just chat through that with you.
Yeah, I'd probably come at it from a couple of different angles. The one thing that comes to my mind for me, and this is probably applicable for 99% of parents out there, moms and dads both, is it is so daunting, the task of parenting well, because um, best case scenario, you had good parents to mimic. Worst case scenario, you had bad parents to mimic. And maybe you've got some people in your life that you can kind of look at. But otherwise, we really don't know what we're doing, you know? And we love our kids and we want the best for our kids. But the reality of it is going to screw up.
Mm.
And so one of the hardest things for me is kind of dealing with my screw ups as a parent and not carrying too heavy of a burden on those screw ups. And at the same time, having the balance to say, okay, I got to lean into this and I've got to do as good as I can and recognize that like the majority of my kids' success in life is on them, not on me. And yet at the same time, I have to pour myself into them as though it's 100% dependent on me. And that's a tough thing to do. You kind of swing back and forth from time to time. Yeah, that's been a hard one and an interesting one for both Cindy and I. Like when I think about us parenting, I'm the dad, she's the mom, but really we're one unit in that thing and we're in it together. And that's probably been one of the hardest things for both of us is, when we look at things and maybe our life, we're all in this process of growing and developing and evolving and our opinions change. And I'm such a different person now with my 25 and 24-year-old kids than when they were 10. It's a huge difference. 15 years. I'm a completely different person with very different views on almost everything. So it's like, I'm responsible for the decisions that I made back when they were 10, even though now I look back on some of those things and I go, whoa, I was way off it,
Yeah. So,
so recognizing that, but then realizing, I did my best.
Yeah.
Even if I today think that, I did something wrong 10 years ago or 15 years ago, or my belief system was off, or I was teaching them something that I wish I'd have taught it differently. Which that's kind of, more the rub for me is it's like I was teaching them, but I kind of wish I would have been teaching them something different or from a different perspective. But I give myself grace in that I know my intention was 100% for their good.
Yeah.
100%. Even though I now look back on it and I go, oh man, I was a little bit off on that,
Sure. Well, it's very easy to look back in hindsight, and I'm glad you answered that because I was going to ask you because you said, "Hey, my screw ups." Like, were they really screw ups? I mean, to me, a screw up is where I get it after the fact, like I really screwed that up, but I look at it as you're trying to, in my life, raising my kids, like, man, I did the very best that I could. I don't remember one time where I'm like, screw them, I'm going to be selfish and I don't care what you think, I'm doing this. I just don't know how many parents, or we're talking about dads, do that. Like, we love our kids so much that we're just like, we're doing the best we can. And looking back, we call them screw ups, but at the time we're like, I didn't know any better. Like, I literally wanted the best for my kids, and I made this decision on the information that I had.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
you said it a different way, but I appreciate you just clarifying that, because I think it's easy for us to beat ourselves up instead of just looking at that. So with that being said, like, call them screw ups with your kids or whatever. Like, how do you work through them with your kids now? They've got to pass with you, right? They've got to pass with you that you grew up, and they look at back at the past of being, there's a lot of positive, but there were some things, oh, dad did this and I hated it when he did this, or whatever that means. Like, how do you address that now with your kids, no matter how old they are, moving forward, and what does that look like for your relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question because I kind of alluded to the fact, I have different thoughts and beliefs today than I did 10 or 15 years ago. And Cindy and I, we've been on an really interesting journey the last 6 or 7 years, and we call our gospel journey. I was raised in a Christian home, raised in the church, raised in a very kind of religious type of a structure. And but God's been revealing himself to me and to Cindy in kind of unique, non-religious ways. I would say the last 5 to 7 years. And it was really interesting because he had Cindy and I on two different paths. We were on parallel paths, but he was speaking to me through different means. He was speaking to her through different means. And for the first several years, we really didn't even know that this was happening. We didn't know we were on different paths. We were so kind of intent on, what each of us was doing and what God was doing in our life and how he was communicating to us, revealing to us. And then those parallel paths kind of came together, and it's been so sweet for us as a couple. But when that happened, when we came together, it was an opportunity then for Cindy and I to go to our kids and kind of say, hey, we want to tell you guys what God's been doing in our life and what we've been learning. And we literally had conversations with them where we said, we raised you with this kind of a focus or a thought process, and we wish that we would have emphasized this or handled circumstances differently. And so it just opened up a great opportunity for us to just have those conversations. And it was partially us kind of being transparent and opening up. It was also partially us kind of saying, will you forgive us? Like we wish that we would have done it differently. Our intentions were good, but will you forgive us? And so this opportunity for them to kind of hear things from our perspective, because they had their perspective the whole time, right? Sure. And so then when they kind of hear us and they start to put the puzzle together and the timeline together, and they're like, hey, yeah, mom and dad were like this then, but they're like this now. And I kind of see that thought process was changing and this was happening. And, they're going through their own things at that time as well. So pulling all of those perspectives together was really, it was healthy, and it kind of helped our relationship. And I think it kind of put us at a place where, not necessarily a restart, because you don't restart, but kind of a reset of our relationship. And Cindy and I have often said, why did God wait so long to reveal some of these things to us?
Yeah.
because our kids were literally almost completely grown
Yeah.
by the time this all happened.
So what was the intersection? Just so people can know, you guys were parallel, and then you came. What brought you guys together?
It's a great question. We went through this marriage class,
Okay.
and it's called Two Becoming One, and it it really kind of, that class changed our marriage. And we had been married 25 years when we went through this. So, by outside perspective, people would probably look at our marriage and our life together and say, wow, they've got a great marriage. That's a very successful marriage. What was interesting was when we went through this class, we were shocked and humbled and convicted at how far off base our marriage was from what God really wanted for us, and how we were supposed to serve one another and love one another unconditionally. And that focus on being one and being unified, we were so far off base. Even though by external standards we had a good marriage, a successful marriage. And so the timing of us going through that class was absolutely huge. And it brought the two parallel paths together, because God was teaching us the same thing, the same concepts, and doing in our lives what he needed to do. But they were, from a separate perspective, and then Two Becoming One kind of just brought it together into just this really cohesive kind of a situation.
It's good, man.
So it was awesome. Yeah.
So what do you think?
And just to kind of build on that for a second, Clay, if I can, it was really kind of understanding unconditional love and understanding love specifically, because that's a word and it's a concept that, we use flippantly. Like, I love pizza, right? But, that's, it's so much more than that. And in a relationship perspective, to love somebody like God loves us is kind of the pinnacle. And so the parallel paths that God had Cindy and I on were him showing us how he loves us. And it took years for us to go through this kind of deconstruction of the religious kind of beliefs that we had before, and this new understanding of, who am I in God's eyes? What's my position in God's eyes? And how does he think about me? And therefore, how can I think about him? And so the deconstruction is what was happening on the parallel paths. And he showed us how he loved us. And then when we did the Two Becoming One class, it was kind of that reversed to say, now here's how you love others. Right. And it took years for us to learn and believe. How does God love me? Like, what I do does dictate my position with God and how much he loves me. And so therefore, I always had this kind of performance relationship with God. Like, I have to do these, this list of things in order for me to be in right standing and good standing with God, in order for him to be loving me. And so then to learn that, like, my performance has nothing to do with how God loves me, that created the foundation for then God to say, and now I want you to love other people regardless of their performance.
It's easier said than done, but the concept is...
It's impossible. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
But I love your perspective. That's really good. On that note, what I wanted to ask you, Darren, is what constitutes a good father?
Well, yeah, what I was just talking about, I think would probably be my new understanding of that is, how do I love my kids
Mhm.
regardless,
Mhm.
right? Like just love them. And so truly loving my kids at a high level, kind of 30,000 foot level, I'd say that's what constitutes
Mhm.
being a good dad
Mhm.
is, do I really love my kids? Now, when you start to unwrap and unpack, what does that mean?
Mhm.
That's where it gets difficult, because it's easy to say I love my kids,
Mhm.
but do my actions bear that out? Like, to say that I love my kids is one thing, but do my actions actually reflect that I'm loving my kids? And you alluded to this before. It's all about, am I being selfish,
Mhm.
or am I putting them first?
Mhm.
And what's my perspective on um, what is best for them?
Mhm.
And that's where it gets so difficult,
Mhm.
because I always think I'm acting in my kids' best interest.
Mhm.
But because I am a human so flawed, I'm actually not.
Mhm.
Even if I genuinely think I am, I may not be acting in their best interests.
Mhm.
And so, that's the rub, the difficulty that we always have to kind of be doing, I think, is to look at things and look at our reactions and be really honest, self-reflective, and say, how'd that go?
Mhm.
You know? And I,
Yeah.
I have a perspective, kind of, this is kind of a filter that I have, is that when I'm following Jesus and I'm following his way of living life and interacting with other people, his way will lead me into the good life. Like, I have a deep, strong conviction that that is true.
Mhm.
And so whenever there's something on in my life that I am not sensing as the good life, you know, and as it relates to my kids, if I do something with my kids and the reaction is, or the outcome, the result is not positive, then I'm going to look back at that and I'm going to say, okay, well, that doesn't feel like the good life to me.
Mhm.
Where did I go wrong?
Mhm.
So I don't question that Jesus's way is the right way, but I'm definitely going to evaluate how I screw it up,
Mhm.
you know,
Mhm.
because this isn't the good life, and it doesn't feel like the good life. And so I did something, and so then we're just constantly in that
Mhm.
evaluation. I think if a dad can be honest to say, I, I, I do love my kids and I want my acts to reflect that,
Mhm.
but then they're going to look at the situation on an ongoing basis and constantly be willing to kind of, be honest, reflective, and evaluate and say, how'd that go?
Mhm.
And then, change course, ask forgiveness,
Yeah. Have you
and just,
yeah. I want to
go
frame this
ahead.
right because I think this is going to be incredibly confusing. So hopefully it won't. But it's a thing that's been on my mind recently. And have you ever had to make a decision for yourself that you know was the best decision for you, um, but it hurt your kids, but you needed to make that decision anyway?
I'm sure that there are a ton of those.
Mhm.
Um, the season of life that I'm in now is, my kids are, especially the two younger kids, are, emerging adults.
Mhm.
And so Cindy and I are empty nesters.
Mhm.
And so, we're on a course right now where, Cindy and I are kind of just, we're in our own boat going down the river of life now, right? And so, all of our decisions are really kind of more centered on the two of us. And so, we're at a point where we're consciously pulling away from the intervention in kids' lives, and so that's positive, but it also has some negative, connotations and results as well, right? And so I'm hesitating with your question because we think that that's best for our kids. We honestly do.
Yeah.
And yet when you pull back and you let your kids kind of go, there's no protection from consequences that, as a parent, I may have been protecting my kids from some consequences in the past, and now I'm kind of letting them go. But I actually think that that's in their best interest,
Yeah. It's tough being a dad. It's tough being a parent.
Yeah.
It just is. I think from this whole conversation, we're just like, we're still figuring it out. You're what? I don't know. What are you, 45? 50,
55.
55. All right. I'm 51. And I'm still like, geez, at some point, like we got to figure it out, but it doesn't happen.
I know.
Awesome.
And what's cool is when we're 75, we're going to look back at when we were 55 and be like, man, that 55-year-old Darren, that 55-year-old
right?
just did not know he was talking about.
Seriously, right? I mean, it's like, why can't we have all the answers right now? It just would make it so much easier, be the perfect parents. Well, I want to wrap this up. I want to ask you a question now. What are you passionate about these days? What are you digging?
Yeah. I'm passionate about my marriage with my wife. That's like number one. That's Cindy and I's number one focus is how do we just keep getting better at, being Cindy's husband. And I have a genuine sense that she's got the same focus with me, which that's when the magic really happens, is when both parties are kind of focused on that and equally committed to that.
What's
so
that
that's
mean?
huge. That's a huge part.
Yeah, Darren, what does that mean practically? Like when you're just like, that's what you're like, I'm just curious. What does that mean for you and Cindy? Like, what do you guys do?
That means there's nothing else that ranks over her.
It's cool.
Basically.
Okay.
And it doesn't mean that I don't have a full life separate from her, because I do, but if rubber meets the road, everything boils down to, our relationship and our unity and our harmony together, being harmonious together. And so if you have that, then nothing else can kind of encroach on that. But what I've also kind of figured out is that if you really are intentional with something like that, it creates freedoms in the other areas of your life. Because if I'm that intentional with Cindy, she's freed up to say, yeah, man, spend as much time doing that as you want, because she's feeling fulfilled. And she doesn't have this sense there's something else in my life that has supplanted her, and it just frees her up. And so I've got a full fun life. I CrossFit several times a week. I've gotten into Olympic lifting as a result of CrossFit. And so I'm a competitive masters Olympic lifter. And that mean a whole lot, other than I show up and put on a weightlifting singlet a few times a year with a couple of other old dudes.
You could have showed up.
Slings around.
You could have showed up in that. I'm just saying.
That would have been terrible, man. Uh,
I love it. I
but
love
then,
it.
with Cindy and I, we've gotten into backpacking and doing all kinds of those
Yeah.
types of adventures as well. And so we live in an unbelievable place right here in Utah.
Mhm.
And we haven't really branched out of Utah backpacking much yet because there's so much to do here. But that's a big thing in Cindy and I's new season of life
Nice.
is to do a lot of those trips. So that's another passion I'd say is kind of emerging in my life as well.
I love it. I love it. Well,
Yeah, man.
Darren, I'm super grateful for you. I just wanted to affirm you again and just, I really appreciate how you've lived your life
Yeah.
and what you have ahead of you. It's awesome. I love watching your relationship with Cindy and just connecting with you. And I'm super stoked I was able to have you on this fun way to connect with people that have left a mark on my life and just give them a platform to share a little bit about who they are. So just wanted to thank you for that.
Awesome.
Cool,
Yeah.
buddy.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the focus that you had on parenting, because that's been such a core part of our relationship.
Yeah.
Our kids are very similar in age, and so we've been kind of going through those seasons together.
Mhm.
So it's meaningful, man. I love my relationship with you, love you, and if I can just say this, one of the things that I've gotten to see you and different um, aspects of your life and different venues and that kind of stuff. Um, but when I see you with Luke, your son,
Mhm.
I see such a great picture and reflection of love,
Mhm.
unconditional, sacrificial love. And that's why I love hanging around you and being your friend, is I feel like if I can spend time with you and you rub off on me, I'm going to be a better dude,
It's
you
awesome.
know, in all walks of life. And so I value our friendship, man.
Yeah, Luke's a great, he's not a tool by any means, but he's a great instrument to show love to people
Yeah.
around us. It's funny because look, all the conversations that I've had so far, we've always brought up Luke. So I just think that's really fun for someone who can't speak. He speaks all the time to a lot of people. You know what I mean? Which is amazing. So
Big time.
it's good.
Big time. And
It's,
you speak with what you do with him and
yeah,
how you do it and your approach.
yeah.
And, like I consider myself, I grew up a Christian and I consider myself a follower of Jesus
Hmm.
now. Like that's the title that I want.
Yeah.
And so whenever I can see people and I can see aspects of their life that seem to be congruent
Hmm.
with how Jesus loves us, man, I want to spend time with them because that helps me to be a
Right.
better follower of the way. And so you're that in my life,
Good stuff,
big time.
man. I appreciate that. Appreciate that.